I'm Femada Shamam. I have the honor of actually leading a non-profit organization called the Association for the Aged, which supports 1,500 people under roof, but a further 3,500 people in the community. So I am playing in the space of non-profit organizations, and that's my initiative, is to actually lead with passion and lead my team so that they can give effect to the purpose, which is to bring dignity, growth, and a meaningful life to all older people. And if we're able to do that, I think we really will live in a wonderful world, and so that's what drives me. Initially, when I started looking at what is it that I've achieved that's out of the norm, I really had to think back on that, because I don't believe that what I do is extraordinary. I believe that what I do is give of myself 100%. But I think locally, some of the achievements has to do with the manner in which I lead the organization and how we drive the aging agenda to make sure that we have maximum impact on the lives of older people. That for me is the most important. When I get into a lift with an older person and they talk about how their lives are better because of Tafta's intervention, that for me is great achievement. I think on a national level and on a global level, it's being able to lobby and advocate for the rights of older persons. On a national level, I serve on different committees, and we look at how we can further develop the non-profit space and make sure that we can serve the most vulnerable in our community. And on an international platform, I serve as the vice chairperson of the Global Aging Network, which has a footprint in more than 70 countries across the world. I also serve on the Common Age board, which is the Commonwealth Association for the Aging. And here again, it's more around our international lobbying and advocacy roles to ensure that the aging agenda is taken forward, but also looking at how we can share best practice models, how we can look at learning from others, but supporting those who are wanting to take forward the aging agenda. There's been many people that have journeyed with me along my life, and many people who have supported me. Fundamentally, the first is my mum. She believed that nothing should limit us. She also had this belief that do whatever you want, but do it with passion and do it right, or else don't bother at all. And that's kind of the philosophy that I live my life by, that in everything I do, I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time and wasting other people's time. When I think about my work at Tafta and my work with older people, there's been many people who have journeyed with me. Other giants in our sector, the likes of Mary Leppens, Margie van Zyl, Chapman, Margie Smith was the previous CEO. But I've also learned quite a lot from the older people themselves. I've learned that somehow or the other, when you turn 60, people lose the filters of wanting to conform to social norms. So they are very generous with their compliments, but equally generous with their criticism. So when I get things wrong, they tell me. And I love listening to that, because then it gives me an opportunity to learn a little bit more. I've also been quite influenced by international figures on the aging agenda, the likes of Professor Kalachi, who brought in this whole concept of having age-friendly environments in which people will be proud to grow old in. And I think that's one of the things I want to aspire to. When I think about the work that I do, there is some selfish motivation, because I'm creating a world for myself. I'm creating a world where, as I age, the world will support me through my aging journey, and I am able to live a fulfilled, purposeful life right until the end. And that's sort of what I want to leave for my child as well. This is how I see aging. Our lives are segmented into 3 phases. Your first phase, basically until you're 30, is where you're defining yourself. You study, you explore different possibilities. So basically you are establishing your identity. The second phase for me is where you're being a squirrel. You just sort of accumulate stuff. you accumulate wealth, you accumulate assets, a whole lot of things that you sort of just squirrel around. But I think your third phase, which is after 60, is where you can make the greatest impact, because no longer are you bound by these social norms. You are able to do what you want. And can you imagine if we had to reframe that and say to older people, you are now entering the best time of your life where you can have the most impact? It really does change the way older people think about themselves, but the way they rise to the occasion. We exist on this earth not just to consume, but also to make an impact on other people's lives. And I think if we adopt this attitude that we are growing right until our last breath, then it does change your perspective completely. And I had this conversation with one of the caregivers, and they asked me, but how can older people give to me? And I said, okay, what older people do, and these are the people that you care for, they give you the opportunity to explore your own humanity. How would you know what the limits of your compassion are if you were not given the opportunity to test that? And that's the gift they give you. I think we have these limitations in terms of how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive our worth, how we perceive the value that we add. I think that where you grow up in a society that does not value caring for others, it's very difficult to create a niche for yourself. I still remember when I was studying, it was quite a joke that I was doing social work, and half the time I was socializing and half the time I was working. So people don't take that seriously. So that was the first thing, the challenge around the stigma of the profession that I chose. The second was trying to work through the head and heart conversation. People assume that because you care and you're compassionate that you have no business sense. And that was a huge barrier that I had to cross over. And my approach to that, how did I get over that, or how did I respond to it? I think, I take the lesson from ants. Ants are quite tenacious, and if they are faced with an obstacle, they go around it, they go under it, they go over it, but nothing is insurmountable. And I think that's the kind of attitude I've adopted as well, where I have received criticism that I'm very compassionate, and that is a bad thing in a business world. I had to ask myself, what do I do to change that perspective? And while at Tafta, I actually enrolled to do my BCom, so that I could understand what is this head concept that everyone was talking about. And it helped me understand how I need to be leading the organization as well. For me, I don't think that it is mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to have one at the expense of the other. I think the both combined is quite powerful. And that's the way I lead my team. Don't be apologetic for being compassionate. Don't be apologetic for caring about our elders, about your colleagues, about people in your community. You don't have to apologize for that. It's a good thing. And you can take that kind of compassionate care and apply it in a business world and achieve great results. So my future goals are, firstly, I think the biggest thing is to be regarded as an influencer, to influence a change in the way the world sees older people. I think that's the big thing. I want to be able to create the infrastructure for the aging agenda to be top of minds for everyone. So when you're looking at it from a local planning perspective, you build buildings that supports people to age in place. When you're looking at housing, ensuring that there is a quota for older people. When you're looking at transport, the question is, as older people age, how can the transport support them to be as active as possible? The second thing I want to do, my goal, is to create a space for mentorship and guidance of future leaders in the aged care sector. In South Africa, aged care is not as prominent as it is in maybe other countries. But I do believe that we can train and mentor the future leaders in the aged care sector, because we have to prepare ourselves for the reality that we will have a growing population of older people. What I want to do is set the foundation for people to be able to respond to the needs of older people as that population grows. That's on a big scale and on a professional level. I think on a personal level, my goal is to be the best mom I can be and the best wife, because I think as much as I play in the space of leading an NPO, my greatest responsibility is that of a mom and a wife, and I take that very seriously, and that balances out all the other roles that I have. So I have a little 8-year-old girl who is a child of the earth and an old soul, and asks the most brilliant questions. I learn from her every day, and I want to make sure that the example that I set is one that she would be proud of, and one that ignites her passion to follow whatever she needs to follow in her life, like the way my mom did for me. I think the first thing I would say to women following in my path is be true to yourself. Be very clear about what you want to achieve, but also, start small. When I started at Tafta, my goal was not to be the CEO of Tafta. My goal when I started was just to be the best version of myself. And in doing so, that passion and that enthusiasm was viewed by others as good, and the opportunities opened itself. So I think the first thing is be authentic and do what you do with great passion. The second advice that I can give is never be afraid of learning, and learning both formally, informally. Ask people, ask for advice. There will be people who will say no, and you need to be okay with that. There will be times where you will fail fast, get over it, move on to the next thing. I firmly believe that it's in our failure sometimes that we learn our greatest lessons. So don't be afraid of that, and don't let that paralyze all the greatness that you can achieve. That's very important to have the correct mindset. I think the third thing as well is to forgive yourself. You make mistakes along the way and you think, oh gosh, maybe I should have done this differently. Forgive yourself and move on. Don't dwell on it. Just to put that into perspective, and another lesson I learned from the older people is that 2 generations down, people don't remember you. So just think about that for a moment. I know of my grandmother because I never got to meet her. But it's really sad that I'm sure things that were really, really important in her life, I don't even know about. So when you think about these great crises in your life, 2 generations down, it's not going to matter. Nobody's going to be concerned about it. You live in the moment and you do the best you can at this time, because that's the only control you have is over your own actions.